form of the Air Force actually helping to coach and fund and work with startup companies as well, focusing in this area on electric propulsion, autonomy, and supply chains. So we'll hear more about that, and also how this all relates to 5G and the need for 5G communications to really power the links that this will all happen when we have autonomous electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles as well. So AFWERX was created in 2017. Then it was really championed by Dr. Will Roper, who I'm personally a big fan of. He was Assistant Secretary for Acquisition for the Air Force, and that really came of age in the last few years. So with that, I want to hand it over to Dash, and I think he has a presentation in mind for us. And after that, we'll have a more detailed discussion with some questions and answers. So get your questions ready, and Dash, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So just a quick, background, my background basically to understand how I fit into all this. So as Brian mentioned, my background is in aerospace, and started with the manned aviation, moved into unmanned aviation. Before I joined AFWERX, that's about 2.5 years back, I was extensively working with small UAS and worked with academia, state and local, federal agencies. I was one of the leads that helped build the drone program for the state of North Carolina, as well as through my company, I had built a lot of other drone programs for public safety, academia, as well as federal agencies. So I started out in the small drone industry, and I saw the challenges the small drone industry faced early on. This is like 2013, 2014, when it was not seen as a technology. And as the various use cases were identified, and from those use cases, programs were built. It was still a challenge when it came to a national integration effort. And so, from use cases, we also understood that we're talking about drones that are going to go beyond visual line of sight. And with that came UTM and airspace integration efforts. And then just around that time, there were another industry, coming into notice, which is the AAM, or earlier it was called urban air mobility, and also before that it was called drone taxis. And a lot of the ideas from small drones on transportation logistics came upon, if we can fly from point A to point B, with a eVTOL aircraft, why can't we put people into it? Why can't we put cargo into it? And another industry was parallelly being created, which eventually was called AAM. So this is where in 2020, Azurity Prime was announced. And I'll talk more about that, but that's when I got on board with my background working with agencies and integrating innovative programs with emerging technologies. As mentioned, Will Roper is one of the key person that is behind the AFWERX program. But we also have another key person, Colonel Diller, Nathan Diller, who's now retired. In December, he officially handed over AFWERX to Colonel Elliot Lee, who's the new director of AFWERX. And we are transitioning towards a new AFWERX, a broader AFWERX, which has not just national reach, but also international reach, as well as from a strategic investment perspective, how do we help our startup companies grow and stuff. So two key names there. And then I got involved in the Azurity Prime program, which was the eVTOL program, and then have been moving into various roles. So currently I'm the head of airspace innovation and prime partnerships. So Azurity Prime is under the AFWERX Prime, which is one of the divisions. And I oversee all airspace integration and management efforts, and also the overall AFWERX Prime partnerships efforts that is extended to not just DoD, but federal, state, local, academia efforts. Next slide. Am I able to move the slides myself? I don't know. Okay,
I
thank
have
you.
you, Josh. There's just a little delay.
Sure, no worry, no worry. So based on the program which I mentioned, AFWERX. So AFWERX, is the innovation arm for the Air Force. So in 2017, when AFWERX was created, the focus was primarily to help innovate our airmen and guardians, because we saw the need for innovation, and that also, when I say innovation from an external innovation, because we are talking about COTS technologies, we saw that as we are working with industry and other entities, we have to start preparing our airmen and guardians to be more innovative. So the early AFWERX, which we don't enjoy saying 1.0s and 2.0s, but if you look at 1.0, was focused on helping our airmen and guardians be more innovative. So through fellowship opportunities, partnership opportunities, we give them collaboration opportunities through collider events and stuff with industry, academia. So from there spun the idea about how do we take this innovation program forward, and that's when Colonel Nathan Diller came in to help build the Agility Prime program, because from the small UAS efforts that the nation was struggling with, because China was leading the drone industry, and DoD and other government agencies saw that there were a lot of challenges for our startup companies, and there wasn't enough opportunities for the startup companies to bring their technology out. And as a result, we wanted to make sure that when it came to AM, Advanced Air Mobility, that is the eVTOL program, China does not take a lead here, and US gives opportunity to our startup companies and researchers to excel this technology forward. But also the key thing was, how do we work with the industry to help them go through the commercial process of certification and integration efforts, because the main focus for AFWERX is to help is focused on dual use technology. That is, these companies that we work with should have first commercial viability before we identify military use cases. So when we put investment to the startup companies, it doesn't mean that we are going to buy those technologies or we are going to be the end users. We will only be end users when the company and the technology is having commercial viability. So once they have commercial viability, we will identify use cases and integrate it within the DoD. So this is where, when Colonel Diller was the director of Agility Prime, and eventually Agility Prime was moved into AFWERX, and this gave the birth to AFWERX 2.0, which now you see as Prime, Spark, and Ventures. So we have one more that isn't in this image in this graph, but basically that's SpaceWorks. Just like Space Force is under Air Force, we have SpaceWorks, which is under AFWERX, and basically SpaceWorks has similar Prime, Spark, and Ventures efforts. So this is mainly focused on AFWERX, and Spark continued to be our innovative program to help our airmen and guardians. But this also gave us the opportunity to bring all our silver dollars and investment to startup companies under one roof, and that is AF Ventures. That is the business capital arm for the Air Force. So this the AF Ventures program runs the SBR and STTR program, the Small Business Investment program, and this is where startup companies can come to the Air Force and either pitch through the open topics, where basically open topics is where we don't know that this is going to be a technology of future need, or we don't know that there is a problem which we will possibly identify in years. But here you have industry that can come in and tell us that this is something you need in the coming years. So this is where they can pitch for a phase one, which is basically up to $75,000, within 90 days commitment. So phase one is basically a deliverables. They just get an opportunity to come and pitch a idea. And phase two is where it goes to prototype, where the companies have to find end users within the Air Force or technical point of contacts within the Air Force to validate their technology and say that this is something the Air Force needs. And again, this is not restricted to flying vehicles or Air Force aviation technologies or aerospace technologies. This could be anything from sensors to uniform, helmets, human factors. It could be anything that makes Air Force successful. So this is where opportunities come, where companies can pitch through open topic. Phase 2 is up to 1.25 million. And when you have an STTR, the company can partner with a research institution and put forward a proposal for phase 2, which is prototyping. And then we have other programs that is between phase 2 and phase 3, STAFI and TAC5, which is a couple of $1 million in investment, where you can bring in matching government agencies to come and match the funding. And then phase 3 is manufacturing. So that's the program where you can take your ideas to prototype to manufacturing. So that's the ventures program. And with the open topics, we also have focus topics where we identify problems across the Air Force. So any unit, any program can approach us and say that this is something that is needed within the Air Force. And if that focus topics is selected, we open it up to everyone, every startup company, and then they can go through a process and win a contract. So it could be either focus topic or open topic. Now, with ideas and prototypes, we also have to think about technologies that are ready today. And that is where the PRIME program comes into effort. This is where we are overcoming the valley of death. That is basically, if you have heard that terminology, it just states that there are so many technologies and efforts that over years and after putting in millions of dollars, the program can die. And it also doesn't reach to the warfighting capability. So to overcome the valley of death, and you can see in that image, the valley, we're overcoming and going through direct acquisition, looking through programs which are within 3 years can become program of record. So this is where the PRIME program is focused on. Basically, technologies that are ready today to be operationalized and commercialized. And the main focus here, as I mentioned earlier, is to help our startup companies, our industry to bring innovative technologies to market, have commercial viability, and also help them be more successful. So this is where we are contributing to the GDP and helping put the taxpayers' money towards the future of making US a leader in innovation. Next slide. And just to refresh the PRIME effort. So as I mentioned, PRIME is focused on technologies that are ready today to be operationalized and commercialized. That's the main thing, is it should be ready today. So this is where our eVTOL program, that is Agility Prime program, came into effect. And the focus is that companies that have actual technologies can participate in the air race. And in the next slide, I'll give you more details about that. But PRIME program is, as I mentioned, is focused on technologies that are ready today. And through our partnerships with various agencies, organizations, we are able to help the startup companies have commercial viability in the market. So this is where we can work with FAA on the aircraft certification, UTM efforts. We can work with them on BVLS operations. We can work with NASA on various research efforts. Again, we are not a research body, or we are not focused on research. Our main focus is on accelerating the technology. And today, the three agencies that are leading the AAM side is FAA, who's the regulatory body, NASA, who's the research body, and we are the operational risk takers. So we basically focus on proving and validating the data and the technology. So this is where our strategic partnerships with FAA and NASA come into effort. And again, we are not a regulatory body or policy body. We are basically evaluating and ensuring that the technology does have merit, and that we are able to work with FAA and NASA to put that into perspective and see how these technologies can accelerate further. Next slide. So Agility Prime program, as we realize that our startup companies will need the support, not just financial, but also intellectual, that is giving access to our SMEs, but also to our test facilities. Now, this is where the key factor comes in is we are creating an environment where industry can come and test these technologies, validate these technologies in a safe environment. FAA, the risk tolerance for FAA is practically zero. But when it comes to the Air Force, our risk tolerance is a little bit more. So we can create a safe environment where companies can test, fail, succeed, test, fail, succeed, and make sure that they can go out into the commercial world, work with FAA on their certification and integration efforts, and get success. So that safe environment is what we are creating. And through the Agility Prime program, we created the Air Race to certification, where we and in the future slides I'll be mentioning about that. But basically, we have companies like Joby, Lyft, Beta. You can name any US company that is in the news now, and we have a collaboration effort with them, either it's through an in-kind testing or it's through a SIBA. And basically, we are looking on to focus on three areas here. One is electric propulsion. What is the future of electric propulsion? What are the limitations of electric propulsion? And what are the challenges that we are going to need to overcome together, not just as AFWERX, but working with the industry, working with the regulatory body, working with the researchers and the other industry to identify how to overcome this challenge. Electric propulsion does have merit, but we haven't reached that point where we have identified what the limit is. So this is where the companies, each of their vehicle have a different design, different concept, and different systems, but all focusing on electric propulsion. So we get to learn this, and we also get to see what are the future other capabilities, either hydrogen or what other power system or battery systems exist. Second is autonomy. The focus of autonomy is that we understand that autonomy is the future. Already the Air Force and within the DoD, there's a lot of autonomy efforts taking place. We also have the autonomy prime, which I'll mention shortly. But the focus here is how do we help these companies accelerate in the autonomy space? Presently, we don't own these technologies. It is owned by the companies, but each of these companies are focusing on different efforts. Basically, there are some companies who are looking to operate this more as a manned aircraft with an operator on board. Then we have companies who are flexible depending on what the regulatory policies are. And then we have companies, an example here is Wisk, that is talking about complete autonomy operations. So we have different partners who are looking at different ways to integrate these aircraft. But end of the day, they all have to operate in the airspace, and they all have to be certified by the FAA. So currently, we are issuing them military airworthiness, military certification to operate in a military airspace. This is where we are able to test this in a military airspace with them. The third thing is supply chain. Supply chain is where these vehicles are seen as, I would say, like a workhorse, or we also call these vehicles as ORBs, which is basically organic resupply buses. So basically, these are aircrafts or technologies that are going to help us in short distance, continuous operations, low altitude. And if we have to utilize them constantly, we have to make sure that the supply chain problem is solved. We cannot have this, like many of our military assets, which require sometime months or sometime a year. The system gets grounded because of a part which is not readily available. This is where we want parts that can be readily available. Maintenance can be quick, but also integration into the airspace can be quick. So this is where these are three key efforts that we are helping. And ever since Agility Prime got into the AAM side, the companies, basically the timeline for AAM has changed from beyond 2030 to under 2030. So we're talking about 2025, 2030. FAA is talking about AAM during the Olympics in 28. We have currently efforts, not we meaning Paris announced their efforts towards AAM in their Olympics. So AAM is that another industry, which initially was all put under one bucket, that is SUS, eVTOLs, AM, all under one bucket, and now are separating their focus. So both these vehicles have to be integrated. But when it comes to testing and integrating these vehicles, it's tough to use these vehicles as test vehicles. So this is where SUS and larger drones can be used as surrogate aircrafts for testing purposes. Next slide. So this is our current efforts, and this is not the most current. This would be, I would say, close to December. It keeps increasing. So we have over $11 billion in commercial investment. We awarded 23 contracts, over 250 companies and university contracts. We have conducted a couple of, it says 5-year, but more than 5 exercises. We have simulator in different locations. One is in Ohio, we have in California, we also have in DC, where these companies are running the simulators. And we are constantly doing testing. Currently, lift aircraft is at Eglin Air Force Base. And then we have, in summer, Joby coming to Edwards for testing purposes. So this is where we are working with these companies. Next slide. Partnerships. This is a key focus for us, and many times agencies and organizations mention this as a important factor for their success, but lots of times it's overlooked because over time silos are created. Agencies and organizations do not communicate, and as a result we are all working on individual efforts, and we don't realize that these individual efforts are sometimes duplicated. Sometimes, you're wasting time. Basically, they have already there's enough data to prove it and stuff. So this is where we hold partnerships as one of our key factors for our success. We have collaborated with FAA and NASA for the commercial viability. With FAA and NASA, we currently are working towards a strategic MOU. We already have an MOU with FAA on aircraft certification, but this is going to be a broader MOU focusing on different offices within the Air Force working within the FAA working with us. So this is not just aircraft certification, airspace integration, next gen, all the other programs. From a NASA effort, we have a strong relation with them. Currently, we are doing site visits to various NASA centers. Last week we were at Glenn. This next week we'll be at Edwards, and then in the following month we'll be in Ames. So currently we have a strong MOU with NASA Ames, specifically with NARI, that's the National Aeronautics Research Institution, with PK, where we have awarded them $1 million to work with us on aircraft certification, airspace integration, autonomy, and supply chain. Airspace integration is what I lead, so my efforts are currently focused on that, but we have other folks focused on different aspects of this. And with these site visits to various centers, we are identifying what efforts are NASA currently focused on, from SUS, AM, autonomy, and other related technologies efforts, and see how we can be plugged into it, either getting access to their test facilities or their SMEs, or collaborating them on testing efforts. And the other side, also on the other side, they are looking to see how they can learn our process on certification and other efforts. So this is a joint collaboration taking place. But we also, when you think about it, we are not the end users of eVTOLs. AFWERX is the connecting factor. So we are working across the DoD with Navy, Army, Marines, and as well as National Guard to identify use cases as well as benefits for eVTOLs to be integrated into their programs. So there's a both internal, that is DoD, collaboration partnership, also an external. We also have relations with NOAA and Department of Health and Human Services. So this is a constant focus for us. Next slide. So when it comes to Agility Prime and the eVTOLs, This is a key thing to understand when it comes to from the perspective of airspace integration as well as use cases. We introduced in and basically now we just closed the application process, but we may open it again. But we created the Airrace to certification, where we are working with these companies to help them understand what certification and airworthiness basically looks like. So they work with our SMEs and at our facilities and are able to get a military airworthiness and certification to fly in military. So basically they're a military flight release to fly in military airspace. Now, the knowledge and they take from this, they work with FAA. So when industry works with FAA to understand what the commercial certification looks like, a lot of that contribution comes from our efforts. So that's where FAA realized that rather than having a middle person working with both agencies, rather we should think about collaborating and preparing for the future of commercial certification. So our focus is on 3 areas of interest. Area of interest 1 is focused on 3 to 8 passenger capability. So these are it's based on payload and speed and the endurance. So 60-minute duration is what area of interest 1 is. Area of interest 2 is a 1 to 2 passenger or equivalent in weight and up to 15 minutes in capability of endurance. And then the area of interest 3 is our cargo capability, which we're looking up to close to greater than 500-pound capability in the payload and looking for over 100 minutes in endurance. So the companies will approach the Agility Prime Airrace certification through these processes, through one of these area of interest, and then they work with our SMEs. They get access to our facilities. So this is where companies, through the in-kind testing. So this is an in-kind testing contract with them, where the testing efforts like wind tunnel testing, human factor study, electromagnetic testing, cyber security testing, all these testing which would take the companies to pay money out of their pocket and go and identify commercial space to do this testing. We are overcoming that cost and giving them access to our facilities. Either it is directly our facilities or partnership with other facilities, that is maybe a NASA facility or another DoD agency or federal agency facility, and we overcome this cost and help them go through the certification. So if you see in the future, as they work towards their commercial certification, they may have already covered more than 50% or 60%, 70% of the requirements. So only the remaining requirements they need to fulfill. So this is where we are taking away a lot of their financial stress and helping them accelerate forward. And in this process, we also have our SMEs, that is our rotorcraft expert, propeller expert, our integration expert, US expert, all the different experts come together to also understand the vehicle capability. And we provide good suggestions to the companies, which they take seriously. And in the future iterations of their vehicle designs, they use some of those concepts and ideas to better their vehicle. So it's a mutual understanding between the company as well as us. At the same time, we do not change their focus and say that you need to see military as your end user. No, we keep them focused on their commercial viability piece, and we just on the side, we have fellows who are identifying use cases and see how we can integrate these aircrafts into routine operations. Next slide. So we have had a lot of success through the program. We had beta technologies that has been doing flights across the nation. We have charging stations. They have set up charging stations. And if you're in Ohio, you can see this in Dayton, Ohio. Oh, sorry, Springfield, Ohio. And then Joby Aviation is in the news always. They are successful and they have some international collaborations right now. And they're looking at operating by 2025. We have Kitty Hawk that was part of our efforts, and Lyft, which is a single passenger vehicle. So these are some of the companies that have had success and is in the social media news basically. Other companies are also having success, but some of those they do not want to make it public. So these are the success that has come through collaboration with the Air Force. Next slide. So our, when it comes to use cases, we have actually identified over 100 use cases for eVTOLs to be integrated into routine operations within the Air Force, Navy, Army. But we have to think about what is an immediate need and can be immediate success also when it comes to integration. So we're looking at our primary use cases are focusing more on short, mid-range logistics support, that is base support, having these aircrafts flying within the base, transporting personnel, equipment, also using it for disaster response, emergency response. So these are some of the key use cases we are focusing on. And as these aircrafts are now entering the military airspace, like I mentioned, lift is at Eglin, Joby and Beta are going to be next in line. We'll be working with stakeholders within these bases to identify how we can integrate these vehicles. So airspace, from an airspace integration effort, the key thing here is for the past 2 years, we were only focused on the OEM side. But then as I got into this program, I realized that the bigger challenge is the integration effort. And when it comes to integration, we have to think about this is not the last innovation that we are going to be seeing. There's a lot of other innovative technologies that are going to be using the airspace. So we have to think about an innovative approach to integrating these vehicles. And we understand that from a national airspace perspective, it's complex, has a lot of challenges, especially operating over people, beyond visual line of sight, a lot of other challenges. But when it comes to military airspace, as I mentioned earlier, our risk tolerance is more, and we are able to test this in complex environments, which again is not as close as NAS, but can help in the long run as we get success. It can also help on the commercial side. So this is where we understand that when it comes to military airspace, there are already, when it comes to basically priority wise, we are lowest in the priority when it comes to eVTOLs. I think even SUS has more priority than us when it comes to eVTOLs. So when I say us, it's meaning eVTOLs. So traditionally, we would be taking weeks, months to block a piece of airspace to do some testing efforts and stuff, which is not advisable for success, which we won't call it success, but in the future, yes, that's how we start. And that brings me to the next slide. So this is where my efforts are focused on. And as I mentioned earlier, Agility Prime is one of our primes. The second prime that we announced last year was Autonomy Prime. And part of Autonomy Prime, we had put out a RFI, which closed December, I think first week of December. And basically part of Autonomy Prime, the RFI we put out was one, we were looking to see, we wanted to hear from companies who wanted to test do autonomy testing basically. And this is not restricted to aerial vehicles, but basically testing autonomy through ground or air-based or anything that is focused on autonomy basically. So we wanted to hear from companies that what level of autonomy they are looking to test. From our focus, we are looking at TRL 7, 8 type of technologies. We are not looking for early technologies, we're looking for mature technologies. The second aspect of the RFI was infrastructure. What infrastructure do we need to support autonomy testing? So this is where we got a lot of responses. So this is where we understand what are the infrastructure needed for testing autonomy. And third, we also had in the RFI the need for group 1, 2, 3 type of aircrafts for autonomy testing purposes. So using them as surrogate aircrafts for testing purposes. We are still evaluating the RFIs, and most probably by the mid of this year, we will put out RFPs out for Autonomy Prime and officially kickstart our efforts in Eglin. So Eglin is going to be our autonomy proving grounds. And what is proving grounds will be a question which you all have in mind. So basically, we, as I mentioned, we are not policymakers. We are not going to, create standards and stuff. But what we are trying to do is prove that the technology has merit. And as industries, as companies are approaching regulatory bodies and decision makers and saying that they are delaying the progress because their technology is ready today, our job is to make sure that this technology actually has merit. And then during that process, we can also see what technologies would we be needing in the future to for our efforts, both from a logistics support effort to even warfighting capabilities. So the proving grounds give the thought. So that is where the next prime is focused on. As Ready Prime is still continuing, and they're continuing their efforts on the eVTOL side. My efforts that I'm leading is the airspace integration efforts, which is focused on the airspace integration and UTM validation and proving ground. The difference here with validation and proving is that one, we want to validate that the data is good, the technology is good, but we also want to help prove that the technology is needed for the effort. So if you're talking about from a proving aspect, we would like to prove from a beyond visual line of sight what is actually needed and help these companies get that commercial viability they need. So currently our efforts, and again, we are not, I would say, experts in this space. We are working with experts, and we are building a team, but our efforts are still early on. The thought here is we don't want to rush into this because it's not going to help when it comes to future technology. So today we're talking about eVTOL integration into the airspace, but we will require SUAS aircrafts for testing purposes. Tomorrow it could be flying suits, it could be flying bikes, it could be anything. And we need to have a valid proving grounds for that to basically validate the technology. So we selected Eglin Airspace because of its complexity. Eglin Airspace, if you all are aware about it, then it's no news for you that it's the most complex military airspace that we can operate in. And if we are successful in the Eglin Airspace to test these vehicles, operate these vehicles, then we will really contribute to towards commercial success also. Also to think about it, the Eglin airspace is close to the Gulf of Mexico, and there are efforts from the private sector to integrate eVTOLs and other innovative technologies for power, gas operations, and operate over water. So there's industry efforts going on in Gulf of Mexico efforts. So if tomorrow both sides are successful, we can come together to talk about dual airspace success. So that's my focus, is how do we help build these technologies towards dual airspace capability? Because number one, we have to think about this as the technology is not military built, it's basically COTS technology. So they are commercial technologies. Now, when we bring in commercial technologies, we also have to ensure that we have access to the commercial airspace. So thinking about eVTOL, a use case, we could fly eVTOLs from our base to the nearest airport to pick our soldiers and bring them to the base. We could also use it for DV visits where our colonels, generals, and all are traveling. We could pick them up in the airport, bring them back. Now, this will give us, this will require us to access both the civil airspace as well as the military airspace. So the future of these technologies, or any innovative technology, shouldn't be restricted to specific airspace and shouldn't be like some of the challenges we are already facing on the military side with drones, the larger drones that can be only operated in military airspace, and it's a challenge. So we want it to be dual airspace, dual technology focus. So the proving grounds is where we are, our efforts currently is that we have working with AFWERX, which is the Air Force Research Laboratory, one of the directorates, RI, which has got the CLUE UTM system, which is a DoD approved UTM system. They have one deployed at MacDill Air Force Base for counter-UAS efforts. We are going to have a couple of them. One is going to be at Eglin. Then in the future, we're going to possibly have one at Springfield, Ohio, and at Edwards Air Force Base. So that's a DoD-approved UTM system. Second, our partnership with NASA brought us towards their UTM system, which is called Freddy. And so we'll be deploying the NASA system Freddy also at Eglin. In the next, I would say, couple of weeks, we should have the Clue UTM system, the DoD-approved UTM system, as well as the federal system, that is a NASA system, Freddy, deployed at Eglin Air Force Base. And the primary, I would say the phase one is basically making sure that these systems are working in a military airspace, because there is complexity. Your technology may be successful in the commercial environment, in the civil airspace, but when it comes to military airspace, because of security restrictions, there are challenges. And those who are in the DoD, they understand it's as difficult as getting connectivity, solving the connectivity issue there. So when we talk about beyond visual line of sight operations in a military airspace, we also have to solve the connectivity issue. But when we are bringing these vehicles, with a lift aircraft now already in Eglin, and we are acquiring some of the SUS aircrafts, drones, and we also are using surrogate aircrafts like helicopters for testing purposes. So phase one is basically making sure that these two UTM systems work, so that we can start at least having situational awareness. Once we have situational awareness, we know the systems work, they are interoperable, they also validate each other. We are not directly investing in sensors, but we will be using ADSB information, traffic information, and then eventually looking at sensors that we will need to be integrated into Eglin. This is also where partnership comes into effort. We are not looking to buy every single thing out there, but we are also looking through partnership to have agencies, organizations, companies bring the technology for a certain amount of time, validate the system, validate their sensor, validate their software technology, and then can go take the technology out. So we're not looking at setting up permanent infrastructure. Some systems will be permanent, but most of them are going to be flexible and basically deployable, system as you go type of approach. So as we get sensors, we are already talking to Navy and also Army to see some of the sensors that they have. We're also looking at weather sensors that we're going to bring in for testing purposes. So this is where the phase one is basically situational awareness. But the success here is also that we are getting access to a secondary tower at Eglin, at Duke Field specifically. That's in Eglin, a secondary tower where we're working with the Eglin ATC to set up a UTM operation center that we can start bringing in other UTM technologies. So this is where private sector, we are preparing for the industry. So till last year, when industry used to approach us for UTM and related technology, phase ones, phase twos through the CIBR program, the challenge was that we don't have an end user. Secondly, we don't have a location where we can test this. And third is, we don't have any metrics to compare how good the system is and what we are trying to achieve from here. So the proving grounds will help us bring in industries, technologies on the UTM and other related technologies to come and test their system, either through the CIBR process or through some sort of CRADAs partnerships with test sites and agencies, and validate the system. So as we move to a phase two, we'll be looking to mimic what a ATC would need from a UTM standpoint, and then from a training standpoint, because we want to prepare the future ATC for innovative aircraft integration efforts, but also we'll be simulating a lot of the efforts before we actually do those testing efforts. And then eventually we have to think about other efforts like infrastructure. When it comes to eVTOLs, we need vertiports, charging stations. So this will also give us opportunities to start working on those efforts. And then and from a CNS perspective, we also have to understand what is needed for AAM. And again, when it comes to AAM, it's going to be a lot of SUS integration testing efforts. So, from a connectivity standpoint, is to understand, are you going to use 5G connectivity, 5G, are we going to use satellite, PNT? We have to understand all these things. And again, there's experts across the DoD, but this is where the challenge is. All the experts are not sitting in one room and trying to solve this problem. And that is what we are trying to do, is work together to solve the problem. And then end of the day, our focus is beyond visual line of sight. So when we look at phase 3 capability, from a phase 3 standpoint in Eglin, is we're going to start talking about what is needed for beyond visual line of sight, but also from a integration UTM effort. We are not looking at stationary site technologies. We are also looking at system on the go. So if we are talking about UTM systems and needed sensors that are needed for warfighting capabilities, they should be easily deployable. So anywhere, anytime type of approach. So we have to start thinking about what that type of systems would look like. So this is where, end of the day, our validation proving grounds for airspace and UTM is going to be, I believe, maybe I'm wrong, like the first federal, state, basically interagency public-private partnership UTM validation and proving ground. So from a test site perspective, I've been talking to test sites, and we are not competing against them. Neither are we looking to, bring in investment into their test sites and stuff. Not at this point, at least. Our main focus there is, as companies are testing their systems in these test sites, they could use another location to come and test and validate and potentially identify a new customer, that is DoD, for their technology. So they may not even know that we may be interested in this technology. So through our partnerships with test sites and other research facilities, we could leverage our validation and proving grounds for them to come and test their, basically validate their system and then show us the capability. And this way we can be the third party to validate this and say, yes, we tested it and this is the test results. Maybe this will benefit the FAA, maybe this will benefit another agency. And then in the end of the day, we may also see potential use cases for the system internally. So these are the efforts going on. This is not a prime. Airspace integration is not a prime, but it's basically benefiting both autonomy and agility prime. Right now, it's focused on agility prime, eVTOL efforts, but I see in the future it being the infrastructure, some of the infrastructure needed for autonomy testing. So we are, and to think about it lastly, as I open up the questions, currently, if we want to use the airspace, military airspace for testing eVTOLs, SUS, a block of airspace is blocked. And our focus is to reduce that block to a bubble. So rather than having a block set aside, when these aircrafts are flying, we would prefer having a bubble around it to say that this is all the separation needed. So this way, operations that need to be done can continue. Also, Eglin has commercial operation. They have a commercial airport, so they can continue their operations, and we can continue our operations. And the bubble gets smaller and smaller, so that both the aircrafts, both on the manned and unmanned side, can work in the airspace. So a lot of things here to still work on, but my thought here is that someone has to do it. Someone has to start and move things forward. And if we are not looking to win a race or anything like that, but our main factor is how do we ensure that our companies are successful, and then we can position US as a leader in unmanned systems, autonomy, robotics, and future emerging technologies. That's it. Last slide is just a thank you slide and the website for AFWERX. Like I said, open up for questions. Feel free to.
Well, Dash, thank you so much. Really interesting work here, pushing advanced air mobility forward. And the Western Florida skies over Eglin will soon have some futuristic aircraft flying around too, which is really, really cool stuff. I'll take the moderator's prerogative and ask the first question. Although I must say, like, you were just checking off all the questions I had throughout the talk, so I don't have many questions left, other than to say a little bit more about the communications infrastructure that you need right now, realizing that you're not doing research, you're tying into existing things that are out there, but the DoD is doing a bunch of 5G things on their own in the research and engineering area as well. Is there anything you can think of right now to help empower that airspace bubble, or the communications requirements, or to make sure the autonomous systems are even though they're operating autonomously, they also need some checks and balances. So just kind of curious about what kind of capabilities you might want right now.
So currently, it was to my surprise when we were talking to AFRL and us about their systems and needs. They said, "What do you all have?" And so I'm not based in Eglin. I'm based in North Carolina. Eglin, we have the 413 Flight Squadron that is helping us there on their efforts. So they are on contract with us. And they said, all we have is laptop and internet in the hangar. And I was like, that's it? Nothing else? Saying, no, we don't have anything else. So this gave me, and I was like, what about, the connectivity side? The last organization that was doing some testing here at Duke Field has dug up for 5G and stuff, and they just took it and went back. So so there is opportunity to see if we can partner with organizations and agencies to potentially bring more stronger connectivity. Right now, we cannot move to a secondary tower because there's no connectivity there. And when you talk about testing these aircrafts, the range is limited to what what the sensor is capable also. So right now with the sensor, it is a short range capability, and if we bring in any sensors to go beyond a certain distance, then again we have to solve the problem connectivity. So the challenge here is we don't have these systems until a couple of weeks now. We will have the system, we'll be actually testing and then understanding. But this is also an opportunity for folks that are already in this space to tell us what we don't know. And it's a big agency. There may be a lot of folks working in different efforts, but are we working together? That's the problem. And it is difficult to identify people. It's not like going on Google and just searching, the Air Force 5G and like get a bunch of information. We just get very small information. So this is where we are trying to build on that partnerships and leverage our space and capabilities. So as I'm building a team, I'm not the connectivity expert. I oversee at a high level everything, but bringing in experts to figure those technical problems and stuff. So most probably in a month, we should have a team working on those efforts. But I saw someone post a question about email. I can drop it in the chat, or Marissa can share. Maybe you want the slides, you can share the slides, and in that slides, she can drop my email also.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for Dash? This is your opportunity to talk right to the AFWERX and Agility Prime and what's going on the DoD side. And while we wait for a question, I guess I'm wondering how this will integrate into the Air Force requirements. You touched upon this earlier, but it's one thing to have COTS products or commercial off the shelf, but it's another thing to really make sure that they meet all of the eventual DoD requirements, everything from sustainability, cybersecurity, mission resilience, make sure that they're strong enough, et cetera. Was wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
So as I mentioned, we are not the policymakers. We don't create standards and stuff. We are working with, so OUSD is the lead for the whole DoD, and they are working on UTM ConOps, which is going to help not just the Air Force, but Army, Navy as well, and other agencies. So we are basically and this is where the challenge comes. Is a lot of folks feel like we are the only ones doing this. We are the only ones that are working directly with industry through our CIBR dollars, because we run the CIBR program. But rest of our efforts are basically to just validate and accelerate the technology. So when it comes to integration efforts, we'll be getting the guidance from OUSD and from our suddenly the acronym. There's a group. It's the PB something policy board. Basically, they're the policy board. They are the ones who PBFA. See, I was close. I knew she's around. I knew you will complete it, so I knew it. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah. So so that's the thing. We are not taking any. We are trying to see what standards exist from a commercial perspective. Again, this is commercial off-the-shelf technology, so there are standards. So we are learning. We are working with ASTM, and again, this is all in the last year. It's been more on standards and stuff because we are trying to identify, based on the standards, where does our performers and the companies stand. We also have to understand that these companies are part of those boards, so ASTM, RTCA and stuff. So end of the day, we feel like a lot of the commercial standards will need to be looked into, but also it doesn't mean that we are going to absorb everything. And end of the day, we will be taking guidance from the agencies that do make the decision and give them the information. So what we are doing here is helpful for them to make the decisions. And if you are following the news, I think it was theirs, the White House OSTP is putting together an AM working group, basically to work on the future of policies and stuff. So we have OUSD representing Air Force as well as DoD here. So that's where we work with it. Our main focus is to work with agencies that are already leading the efforts on policies and standards.
Fantastic. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question?
So I see a question here. Any thoughts on the use of C-band or L-band for BLOS? So this is where we just ordered the systems. So we are relying on AFRL, RI, NASA to give us more clearance on what is needed for their systems. But it's not that we are not going to be testing the C-band, L-band. We'll be taking guidance from NASA on this, as well as across DoD, the testing effort. So as mentioned earlier, like, we are not going to be kickstarting any testing efforts. We're just going to be bringing in systems to our proving grounds to validate systems. So will we test in C-band? Yes. Will we test in L-band? Yes. We'll see both and see what is needed. But at this point, we don't want to make any sort of decisions because we are still too early into it. But again, this is where we expect industry, academia, and other organizations to tell us what has worked, what has not worked, because end of the day, whatever we are doing is not, again, for Air Force success, it's for the commercial viability. So if we work together, then we don't have to struggle with so many lessons learned from all the research and stuff. So an example is also, I'll put this, it's not related to C-band stuff, but if there are companies out there are already working with other agencies, NASA or DoD agencies on SBIR phase 2s, we are interested to know about it because we could potentially help the company go to a phase 3 by bringing in matching funding. So this is where we want to help the companies, but we don't want to start a ground level effort, and we don't want to be the first ones to go out and say that, hey, we are the only ones doing this. So we just want to collaborate more.
Fantastic. And Dash, I'll give you the opportunity to ask as well. Do you have any questions for industry? We have folks here from telecom providers, manufacturers, the small UAS industry. Is there anything that you're curious about?
Sure. I had spoken to Ajit, I think a couple of months back, and I don't know if, Brian, you were there on the call, but I was trying to understand, like, I think what, if my information is right, that there was 5G, infrastructure being deployed in a couple of locations, if I'm not wrong, Virginia and somewhere else. Have you all thought about some form of a partnership with us. And again, I have to get into CRADAs and MOU more in depth to see this, but possibly leveraging Eglin into that effort and having some systems deployed there to help us move things forward and have it there for some period of time. And again, like I said, it's like, do we want to buy everything today? No, we want to make sure what is working, what is good, and then potentially in the future, buy it. But at this point, we would like to see if there is a pipeline. Again, I am not the expert on on how some of these CRADAs and MOUs work. I'm learning it every single day. Some of the efforts, I've been talking to New Air and other test sites about some partnership opportunities. So I would like to see if y'all have any idea, maybe not today we answer it, maybe in the future, of bringing in your systems and using it towards the proving ground validation, and then, benefiting both the commercial and the military space here.
I think Leila has wants to respond to that question.
Yeah, well, I just jumping in, and I don't have a full answer for you, as you can guess, Dash. I would say definitely we don't want to duplicate efforts, and we want to, let's say, leverage all the synergies. So, and it goes both ways. Definitely, we would like to leverage your existing capabilities and to have the opportunity of this doing the same. There are questions that we would, as you were saying, like we would need to understand how to work on collaboration agreements. I can anticipate that we are working on a collaboration agreement with NASA right now, so I know it's possible. We would need to discuss offline and get more details on how that would work. Yes.
And I think MITRE Engenuity, isn't it a non-profit, if I'm not wrong?
Yes, we are a non-profit.
I feel there's opportunity there. And again, with NASA, we are working with NASA through some of the company consortium that they are building to replicate the Langley UTM Operations Center at Edwards. So we're just trying to make sure that, again, people do not confuse us as a new, a parallel lead in something. We just want to make sure that companies can test it in civil airspace as well as military airspace. And the problem is we are not catered for the for the commercial technology today, because it's cost technology. So we want to be ready. And if you have success in the civil airspace, then we would like to replicate it here in the military airspace, so that when they come, it doesn't take 6 months for them to integrate and then realize that they wasted 6 months to just plug into our NIPR system and stuff. So this is where I would like to see if there are consortiums that we could be plugged into. And if we have to work through a CRADA, MOU, or through another partnership, always open to it.
Great to hear. Yeah, we'll follow up offline on this.
All right, fantastic. Well, we're going to close out today's session. So thank everybody for joining today's roundtable with AFWERX and Dash. And Dash, thank you so much for participating with us and joining us today. We really appreciate it, and hearing all these great insights about what's going on in the future of advanced air mobility, especially the commercial and off the shelf almost electronic vertical takeoff aircraft is really, really interesting. So again, thank you so much. And with that, we're going to close out. I'm going to plug, I believe sometime next month, we're going to have another roundtable discussion with a representative from the state of North Carolina Aviation as well. So stay tuned for that. And with that, I will say good afternoon, and enjoy this beautiful weather we're having on the East Coast. On the West Coast, maybe not so much, but please take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.